Thanks for attending. It's kind of humbling to be here, especially following the presentations we've seen today. So thank you for even being here and paying attention to what we have to say. We're a small cybersecurity company, headquartered in Edinburgh. We started 2 years ago. We're a team of 18 people, and we do cybersecurity consulting and cybersecurity managed services. So the purpose of the talk today is to talk a little bit about the data that we've accumulated only in a year. I'm not going to comment on the size, and I'm really thankful I omitted that slide now following the SecureWorks presentation, because it would have been quite humbling. And a little bit at the beginning of the presentation, what we wanted to do was go back to what is it that we are talking about when we talk about big data? Because I think there is an element of size, obviously, but there's also, which was for us more interesting, an element of the questions that you can ask of it. And that's kind of where we focused on it. So the challenge with big data is the devil is in the detail. It's not just about being able to ask statistical questions, which is, I'm glad at a lot of the things that came up in the previous conversation, because they validate some of the thinking we've been doing through the last 2 years. So the objective of today is to show some of the results of the activity that we managed to hunt for the past year and a half since we've been getting all this data, and how we've been trying to convert that into A, geeky fun and actual value that we can give from an OSINT level to our customers, but B, and this was the unexpected part, some of the more kind of societal impacts that we've been able to pull from that, which were quite interesting to us because we didn't expect that. So the database that we collected has different indicators and different types of signals that we're collecting, but we're going to focus specifically on the type of phishing information that we've been getting. So one of our services is mainly focused around phishing protection. And what it does for that is collects a heck of a lot of email that we receive from our customers, and we split it into a whole bunch of atoms, and we then investigate all the different atoms. Again, in a very structured way, which is something that came up before, which I was also very pleased to see. So we followed a very similar set of rules in our methodologies, where we take two approaches, but both approaches, when looking at this big data, required us to really understand the type of data that we were handling. The idea that we originally had to begin with of, well, let's ingest everything, no matter the format, in raw format, and chuck it into a big, kind of flexible database. Don't worry about typifying it a lot, and then we'll ask questions. So that is great for some things, but it's really, really bad when you really need to understand each of the moving pieces of a particular attack or campaign. So being very exact about how we parse things was a very interesting conversation we have with the development team back in the day, and kind of revalidated a bit by the previous talk. So we got one right. And the model that we choose is very simple. We don't do a lot of statistical analysis. There's some of that helps us select the families of data that we want to pay attention to. So particular spikes, particular anomalies, particular geolocation, stuff like that. It helps to do a pre-filter. But then within those families, we take a very human-led approach. And that's kind of where we were looking for. We're looking for the human insight into data, not just correlations. Going back to the old adage of correlation does not imply causation, we try to annul that bias that mathematics can bring to looking at a lot of data by applying a very human element to it. So yes, we do a lot of machine learning analysis, we do a lot of expert system analysis, there's a heck of a lot of rules here involved, as well as a little bit of machine suggesting us paths to go forward. But ultimately, there's a lot of human analysis, which is something that we've been only able to do recently as we amassed what my marketed team defensively could call big data. Because before that, it wouldn't happen. So this is kind of the first presentation we're doing in this, so bear with us. We are, in the words of Robert Heinlein, about an egg. We're just coming around having big enough data that we can actually have some insights on it. So very much a working model, and very much aimed at the value that we're getting through it kind of immediately, as well as some of the implications for society that we see. So we're going to show 3 case studies. Xenia is going to guide us through them. And then at the back end, I will come back to kind of close it with some of the more philosophical insights.
Thank you. So attack stage number 1. This is the email that got reported to us by one of our customers. Quite generic. Zahid Mukhtar has shared a business agreement with you. But it's worth saying that most of our customers are law firms, which means they are really well trained in data privacy and data protection, take it really seriously. So Mark, being a good guy that he is, responded back and said, Zahid, I'm not sure if that was meant for me. Rest assured, I've not opened it. It's deleted. Your secret is safe with me. To which Zahid came back with, you know, Mark, that's a contract proposal for you. Please log in using your corporate email address, following the link in that email to access the document. And let's have a look at this from the perspective that an average user how a user would have acted with it without any prior InfoSec knowledge. What we always tell to people, we say, Google it. Find out if the person is real, if the company is real. Try and find something on the internet. And lo and behold, there is actually Overton Trading Company, living and breathing company in UK, been registered since 2012. Their managing director is Mukhtar Zahid, who supposedly has sent an email. They've got a couple of sister companies, and that's when we really need to look at the artifact. And the artifact of this particular email is the link that it was leading to. And when we have a look at that, so we had to redact some for privacy issues, but it was a SharePoint address /personal leading to a personal space. The name in the personal space and the domain did not correlate, not with Overton Trading, neither with the owner of the company, neither with the person the email got sent to. And that's when we receive another email through from a law firm as well. It's worth saying that time difference between the emails was a minute. So the first one was sent at 14:22, the next one was received at 14:23. During that time, the subject and the payload got adjusted, which makes it not only a phishing attack, but a targeted phishing campaign against the law firms that we were defending. The personal space that redacted stayed the same. However, the payload at the end of each was different. Now, unfortunately, by the time that we got back, by the time that we have received those emails, the documents that were at the end of it were already taken down, which only leaves us with the assumption. But our biggest bet was on this attack being a malware dropper at the end that was highly targeted for the law firms. And that leaves us with some insights about this attack. So what we have seen was actually a double vector. First, the legitimate company, Overton Trading, was broken into and impersonated. And attacker has used that to approach the law firms with a phishing link. So that brings us to another issue. The attackers are no longer using illegitimate domains. They're no longer using some fake phishing tricks. They are actually breaking into legitimate companies. Have you got anything to add to it?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. The interesting for us here was it was one of the first times that we were able to identify something that was as localized, as regionalized as a campaign running against the UK, against law firms in the UK. The timing was fascinating in that two of our customers, and we don't have hundreds of thousands of customers, right? But two of them spotted it immediately and sent it to the service. So it was quite a nice validation from the service point of view, and it was an incredible point for us to be able to actually correlate a couple of attacks happening at the same time and be able to learn something that we didn't know by looking at the individual ones. That's where the analysis really kicked in for us, and we started looking at the value you can get from it. From a volume of data, this is a good example of something very simple that you can do when you get access to big data and security, which is something that's still relatively new in terms of direct benefit to customers. Next one's fine. Attack study number 2. So this one is, again, very similar to the previous one in that it's not a sophisticated attack, but it's interesting in the way that they're trying to exploit somebody else's infrastructure to get you to click on the attack. And again, the interesting thing here was this was closed automatically by the system. So this kicked in our analysis as part of the human review that we do of things that are clicked automatically. So we don't close anything automatically until we're very sure that it has no false positives. So that's a good thing. We still have humans do a QA on that because we want to learn. What can the machine teach us from this that we would have missed? Would our humans have seen the same thing? Or we do have a false positive that we missed originally. So it picked this one up, and this is a very similar phishing type of stamp. It's a FedEx type email. We've all received them with click here for updating your details for the parcel. If you look at the email, if you look at the mail from at the top, it's an absolute disaster, so relatively easy to spot that it wasn't anything related to FedEx. In fact, there's one that is funky, that it's the X on the FedEx is kind of dropped down. It's actually not an X character, which I'm guessing has to do with avoiding some of the phishing detections. Anyway, that wasn't the fun part. The fun part was the link, the FedEx link. If you actually follow the FedEx link, it goes to, and you won't be able to see it here, but this is appengine.google.com. So the FedEx link that they're phishing goes to an actual Google link. And I was going, what the hell? How can you leverage that to leverage an attack? And if you follow through the link, you'll see that there's another URL embedded into that Google link. So what that meant when we started playing with it was that the Google link was authorizing an unauthorized redirect, which meant that if you get a link from that, Google would automatically redirect you to the payload that it was trying to distribute. In this case, the payload was another site that would have downloaded a malicious component and actually run in your browser. The interesting thing is when we reported this to Google, Google actually replied that this is a feature and not a bug. Decided to accept with it and live with it as a part of the traditional offering that they do. So again, the insight for me on this one is similar to the previous one. There's a big brand being abused here. So somebody's pretending to be FedEx. Nothing new under the sun. The second thing is it relied on a vulnerability on a valid service. And again, similar to use case number one, we're not talking about people creating funny domains anymore that look alike something like FedEx. They're now going for things that actually exist there, that are valid things so that they skip all the malware protection. I mean, Google.com is going to be whitelisted in 100 different things. So they need to find a vulnerability there to be able to deploy the payload that they wanted. And in this case, I think both attackers and defenders all agree this was definitely a very useful feature for them. Study number 3.
Thank you. So in the study number 3, it's not so much about the attack as about the big companies, how they handle phishing attacks, because it is really widespread. I'm pretty sure everyone in this audience has been a victim of at least one of them to a certain extent. So this is actually a PayPal phishing email that one of our analysts got and kindly shared to our big red button. As you can see, the dear gmail.com. You've authorized the payment to something that sounds like Netflix, but probably geolocated in Africa. The links at the bottom will most possibly lead to the legitimate PayPal links, terms and conditions, and things like that. But the large button, managing accounts and transactions, that anyone in their right mind would go for is actually a phishing link that once you go there, you put your PayPal details, they snatch them, that's it, game over. So the question that we want to raise here, what does PayPal do to handle it? What is the company's response? And PayPal, being a good guy, have the whole big department dealing with phishing campaigns, dealing with the abuse of their good name. You can report it, you can track the progress, you will have somebody to assist you throughout, but they will probably return the money as well. And all these perks of being a client of a big company. However, there is another end of the spectrum, and that's EDF Energy. So that is, again, an email. We actually recorded a whole campaign on Big Red Button. This is one of the emails, again, phishing email, loyalty@edfenergy.co.uk. Have you not, how many people in here know which email address precisely their online invoices are coming from? If you don't know this by heart, this would have caught you straight away. The link leads you to the phishing email, to the phishing website. Again, the usual drill. So what does EDF Energy, how does EDF Energy handle this, this attack? How does it handle those situations? They make you a little bit of a security analyst yourself and give you five quick steps on how to identify that you've been scammed. They don't have a phishing department. They don't have a fraud support. They want you to do it yourself. And if you are still stuck and you want to report it, you will have to report it to the governing body, so police in our case. And that brings us to the next insights. Some companies are acting as police and proactively defending their customers and their good name, while the other ones are acting as teachers and trying to educate you on how to handle that. What is the appropriate response to phishing? Should the companies take ownership of what's happening? Should the companies take ownership of the exploitation of their good name? And should they acknowledge and be responsible for it? While there are good guys like PayPal who say, yeah, of course, we're going to help you, there's also the companies that just push you to the other direction. Is it something that should be governed by the police? Is it something that should be governed by us as customers? Is it something that should be referred to the private sector? So, for example, Big Red Button that we provide, something that you go to the private sector, they give you advice? Or is it the company's responsibility?
Kind of closing remarks, and to echo a little bit of the things that were said before. In our 2 years of running, the premise that we started with was automation in security is what's going to change the name of the game. Whether you're talking orchestration, whether you're talking analysis, is the use of force multipliers that's going to mean the real difference for the blue team, for us to be able to protect our customers. And we still believe that. I think what we learned in the last year by having data and by having a historical big enough amount of attacks and hacks and indicators is that you still need that human element. And it kind of validates the need for security analysts in general. Computers are very good, and they're very good at giving you the power to be able to digest an amount of information that you would by no means be able to do by hand or even by scripts or even with an amazing team. But you need to overlay that quality on top to be able to translate that into actionable insights, things that we can actually go do immediately, block in a firewall, block in a proxy, help our customers. And to be able to identify out of that an attack campaign for us was super cool. So as a little tiny startup company, we're really proud of that. What actually boggled our minds was that we were starting to notice the capability to be able to group other elements of society, non-technical elements of society, into different distinct groups. So this idea of companies that are actually aware of their responsibility given their size, and they're taking the challenge, and they're providing you with the capabilities to stay safe and not to be allowed to have their brand taken over like PayPal did, is very much in the one camp. And on the right side, you have all the other companies, like Google in this case, which I'm baffled because I actually love them. I actually think I've worked with them before, and I think they're really, really good. But a company that tells you something that is being actively exploited in the wild by an attacker to hurt people is a feature and not a bug, that demonstrates a level of irresponsibility and immaturity that I don't think we can afford anymore. So for us to be able to start to group that and to find that level of insight was an absolute surprise, and we're kind of chuffed to be able to present it here because it was news for us. Thank you very much. That was it.